My guest name today is Dalton Ruer. If you're not already connected with Dalton, feel free to go out to his LinkedIn profile there. I know you're multitaskers. Go ahead and grab the screenshot and go do that while we're getting started here. When my agentic AI profiler and call screener recognized that you were the chief question officer, Dalton, I knew I had to get you like down to the studio rather than just filming a video like I normally do with my guest. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Thank you so much for having me, Qlik Dork. I'm definitely a long-time listener, first-time caller. Appreciate your having me in the studio. I'm so thrilled to be here. I found that title, Chief Question Officer, to be so interesting. I'll bet you get asked about that an awful lot. I definitely get that comment a lot about being a Chief Question Officer. People really seem to love that. They always have questions for me then that I have to answer, but you get the idea. In fact, I've got my first question for you today is really along the lines of the fact I just took a new job. I'm with an organization that's been using Qlik for 20 years now. They had QlikView in the past. They migrated to Qlik Sense. They're now in Qlik SaaS, and they're loving the idea. The applications are working great, but the team that architected everything is gone. And now we're kind of struggling with, man, we've got like thousands of QVDs in different directories and subdirectories, and people like me that are new to the organization, and the boss that just took over the analytics department is new and really doesn't understand why in the world we've got all these QVDs. Why don't we just read the data right out of our online transaction processing systems? What can you tell me about why QVDs exist? A question I get asked an awful lot. Why in the world do we have these QVDs? I think it's completely reasonable for people like you who get parachuted into new organizations that have a large infrastructure and they've been running this thing for years, or your boss or your boss's boss, to wonder what in the world those are. Because most people think of Qlik Sense in this bracket here. We're a data visualization tool. Hey, doesn't Qlik Sense generate pie charts? Sure we do. That's a small part of what Qlik Sense does, though. And so QVD files really fit into these areas here, where we're moving data towards outcomes. We need to move it, transform it. We need to make it trustable, and it needs to be in a business-ready data format so that, yeah, we can visualize it in a pie chart or a KPI or all kinds of other visualizations that you'll read on my blog, of course, right? So not to worry that you've got questions about that. That makes total sense. When we're looking at QVD files in general, what I want you to think of is think of them as Qlik virtual data warehouse tables. These things were usually built in times when organizations needed answers to business questions. They don't already have a data warehouse, or they were planning to build a data warehouse, but it was going to take a year or 2 years to be ready, and they didn't want to wait for their business answers that long. So we ended up building these. These things are basically the interface between the source systems. The data gets read, stored into this format, and then eventually those things can go into applications. A single QVD could be in one or more applications, and any one application can have one or more QVDs that it ingests. Certainly, there's nothing saying I have to do this. You can absolutely read source data right into your application. But here's several of the benefits that I think of for why your organization probably created these QVDs a long time ago when you had an architect who was on top of what they were doing. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to read them all to you, but there's a couple that really jump out to me. One is what I call incremental loads. When you think about the millions or billions of records of data you have in your source systems, some of those records change, but a lot of them do not change. And so if I've got millions or billions of records over here, I don't want to have to read them all every single time into my application because that would create a big hit either on my OLTP source or the reporting database where these things may lie. I can do incremental loads where I say, hey, show me the data that's changed since the last time I read it. And rather than reading millions or billions, I might only be pulling 5, 10, 50, or maybe 1,000 records per hour, per day, or whatever the time period is that we say that we need this data kind of near real time to be in the application. Obviously, the more near real time, the more often we would be reading those changes and those incremental values. So the other things that that helps us save on is I'm not hitting my OLTP system for every single chart, for every single query that I do all the time. That data has been loaded. And the great thing is, once I've loaded it, if I'm trying to change formulas, values, and create new variables and things, I need to know that that data is static then. And it is static. It's a snapshot in time in that QVD. So if I've got two applications and I'm trying to determine, hey, do these two formulas match? I need to know that the data is going to be consistent. I'm not chasing my tail. The other thing that that does, as I'm reducing my hits on my OLTP systems or in my cloud warehouses or my mainframe, I'm reducing the impact and the dollars at the same time. So that saves a lot of things being extracted. Why am I going to pay to extract the exact same data 1,000 times into a whole bunch of different applications if the data is not really changing that frequently? The other thing that this offers is security. We don't always want every single developer or designer in a company to have access to those source systems. And so one architect can create the connection, can read the data, and then numerous decentralized developers down the path can continue working on these things and doing transformations and building applications, and they're never able to touch those source systems to begin with. Qlik virtual data warehouse tables. That's an interesting thing. I think that will probably help bridge the gap for people. I really like that. What I don't really understand, though, is why I see the same names. Like I've got patients and encounters in multiple different directories, and sometimes the directories are called layer one, layer two, layer three. What is all that about? How am I supposed to know what those things are containing? Hey, that's another great question. I kind of knew you were going to ask it. You know, my agentic AI read your mind and studied your profile. And I knew you'd be asking me this question. How do I make sense of these layers? Well, first thing I want you to understand that the term layer is obviously a Qlik-centric term. That's not what we think about in the data movement space. And so it can be confusing. If there were old slides and notes that you read in some notebook, from the former architect or data modelers, you might have read that. What I want you to do is think of it in terms of something that's more modern. When we think of modern data movement, we think of this lakehouse type of architecture where we're taking data from the source, we land it raw, and then we do CDC changes on that, and we store these things in batches. So the bronze storage area is where I've got the data and the changes, but it's still raw. It's in the same column names, most likely, that it was in my source systems. I've just got the data and it's ready now to be transformed and merged. When I'm doing transformations, I might need to bring some fields from one table, some fields from another table, fields from a third table. I might transform it, create new fields. Maybe I'm doing some denormalization, like, I've got this cross-reference table because my database was, normalized to the 15th form. And I want to bring these back so I don't have a giant snowflake schema in my warehouse. I may want to bring these things together, handle slowly changing dimensions, yada, yada, yada. All the reasons that you build a warehouse, right? And so that silver stage is, and those transformations are usually what we think of as data warehouses. That data can go then be read. We then have a step where we call it a data mart, where I'm bringing these different disparate tables together into a data mart that we call it. So if I look at the mart, I know, ooh, here's my fact table. Here's the dimensions that I need. Well, guess what? That's all we've been doing since 1993 with QVD files. I read the data out of a source and I want to write them raw. I just need, here's the data that came out of there. when I go do my incremental loads, or I look at the CDC from a modern pipeline like Qlik Talent Cloud offers. I can read the CDC changes and just merge that and then restore those QVDs. So I've got latest and greatest again, just in the raw format, same colonies. Then I might go through and do some transformations. Maybe I do need to add a field, subtract a field, parse a field, capitalize a field, uncapitalize a field, blah, 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 blah with transformations, right? I could denormalize things at this layer and do those. And all of these really are just Qlik virtual data warehouse tables, individual tables. When I think about the MART concept, that's what the application is, right? That's where we bring the data model together. So instead of dealing with tables, we're dealing with a MART or the whole structure. I can generate that into a Qlik application, or I can send that to a Parquet file as a data MART. With the advent of our Qlik Talent Cloud, you also have the option for what we call a data product. A data product is like the mart that you would have in a cloud warehouse type thing, where we've brought all of the appropriate tables together for end users. These things are all fantastic for developers. These things are great for end users where they can just go shopping and say, hey, I'm looking for surgical data. I'm looking for sales data. I'm looking for my HR data. And all of the appropriate tables are there and identified. And with the data product, then they also have data quality and trust scores so that end users can really self-serve themselves in a way that's governed because all the transformations and all the logic and IP have been buried in to either the QVDs that then get used or there. And then when they generate an application, that stuff is all there for them. Wow, that's fantastic. That really simplifies things. I think that will be easy for everybody else in the department to understand, for the boss as well. That the idea was when these things got started, the warehouse didn't exist, and we have some that have warehouses now, but we have some that are still just coming from raw data sources, and that makes things a little bit easier, I think, for them to understand and why we've got the different directories with those layers. One other thing, I'm a developer at heart. I know you are too, Qlik Dork, and I comment all my code. Well, it seemed weird. I had all these load scripts that I see, and there's comments, and it says comments about tables and comments about fields and tags. I really don't understand why they're there. Like, I can see them as a developer, great, but why didn't I just use like load script comment marks and make those same things? Where do those comments and those tags go? I gotta tell you, I love somebody who does comments, and you better believe the Qlik Dork's code is commented. And it is a little ironic. It might be a little bit hard to understand. Yes, in Qlik Sense or Qlik View, you can do slash slash and write comments like the patients are these, the patient ID is this, the name is this, here's why I did this. The comments and the tags, these are functions. It's not just, hey, I'm not just writing a comment. It's like I'm literally causing a function to occur for a table or for a field. And this is in this case the table. I'm saying I want you to add this with metadata. So the with is the metadata that you want to add to the table or the field. So in this case, I'm looking at a field called age. Um, I have a post recently that I wrote about this. Feel free to go out and check this out, Dalton, or anybody else watching. If you just go to qlikdork.com, it's called The Importance of Metadata. It's the second most recent post I wrote, and I used this case of age, right? In this case, I had values of 999. Holy cow. Horrible data quality. Fields filled in everywhere. There's no blanks, there's no nulls, but that seems like a really crazy age. The metadata, if you go out and read that, you'll understand the age of our patient in terms of, and you'll have to go read that blog to see, to understand the importance of that metadata and what that stands for. Holy smokes, that's crazy. So that those comments and those tags, that metadata that helps us lead to trust, those travel with those QVDs. So when I use those in any other application, whatever the developer was that put in there, as I read those, I'll get to see those then in the data viewer. That is awesome stuff. I appreciate that. Soon as we're done, I didn't want to be rude and go look at it now, but I'm definitely going to go check out your blog post about that so that I can see how I can do those and take advantage of those things. Last question for the day. My boss knows that there's a ton of intellectual property inside of these Qlik Sense applications. So these load scripts, we don't care about the bar charts and the pie charts. It's all the formulas and the code that we see where there's 85 lines of nested if statements creating all these different fields and flags and things like that. We understand some of that stuff, but how can we share that with other things? Because those QVD files are proprietary and I can't load those in anything else. What can I do to help this analytics director now realize that we could share the work that we've done with other things while continuing to do those calculations and things inside of our Qlik Sense load scripts? Oh boy, man, if I had a nickel for every time I've been asked that question, I'd be a rich guy and I'd probably have like two bow ties by now or something. You can absolutely extend the QVDs outside of Qlik Sense, and you can extend Qlik Sense from outside of using QVDs. Yes, when I'm building QVDs, I read the data from a source and I write a QVD, and then I go do a merge, and then I do transformations. When I'm storing these things, there's nothing that tells me I have to use a QVD. The QVD file does offer some performance benefits and some things that are unique to Qlik, like the dual data type that you would use for um, flags and things for performance when I'm using charts, but you don't have to. There's no reason you can't store into a CSV file that you want to read into something else that's got nothing to do with Qlik Sense at all. But the IP and the logic that I do at these steps is there. And so I could share my first raw, I can share the things that are merged, I can share the things that are transformed, and I can also write to Parquet files just as easily as I write to QVD files. There's no reason you can't extend those things beyond. And likewise, there's no reason I have to use Qlik Sense to extract raw data or get them merged. If you've got some non-Qlik Sense system, or you're using a Qlik Talon pipeline, or you're using Talon to generate the data, and you can give me a CSV or a Parquet file that has what the data is that you need me to use, and then I continue doing transformations or bringing that into an app, fantastic. If you say we started with no warehouses years ago, but now we do have warehouses, fantastic. Go ahead and write that data out either to a QVD if you're using Talend or our pipeline, or write it out to a CSV from something else or a Parquet file, and I'll bring that data in to my application. And then if I still need to do formulas or variables, I can do those things there. And I've got that data. So there's no reason you have to use QVDs other than if you're already in the Qlik Sense environment, it makes sense for performance and for the fact that you can do dual data types and you can retain that metadata. When I put that metadata in, yay, if I write that to a CSV, you lose the metadata. If I write it to Parquet, you lose the metadata. Although then you could create a Parquet file. It is the metadata file if that's what you chose to do. Holy smokes, are you kidding me? I see all the store statements in the code, but all I have to do is literally go just copy that store command and store it to a Parquet file instead. Oh, that is a great question. And man, I apologize. I had this here to make sure I told you. And Dalton, I'm really bad at these sometimes. I get so excited about what I'm doing. I wanted to make sure that you were aware you could write an individual table to a Parquet file. But dude, you can do store table one, table two, table three, table four, table five, and write your entire mart to a Parquet file. One single Parquet file is actually the mark. So if I was going to then extend this out, I could just point at surgery.parquet or HR.Parquet rather than requiring somebody to know it's QVD1, QVD2, QVD3, QVD4, QVD5, QVD6, things like that. So entire Mart is there for you. That's fantastic. I so appreciate your having me into your cathedral today. I'm going to keep watching you, I promise. I love it. And this cathedral sure is beautiful and sunny here in Gainesville. Thank you, Qlik Dork. Dalton, I'm so glad you got something out of this. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show today. I don't often invite people here into my Data Cathedral studios, but man, I loved your title so much, and I've heard great things about you. It was really a blast having you here today. For everybody else out there watching, I hope you've learned something like Dalton did. There's a reason why those things were there, but I get it. Everybody at Qlik gets it. Sometimes these architectures and infrastructures were put into place 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you're just being parachuted in, and maybe you didn't get it. I hope you do now. Yes, QVDs are proprietary. They don't have to be used, right? They offer benefits, but any of the other systems that we file systems, if I write to CSV or Parquet, still offer me the same thing. I can do incremental loads right to Parquet. I can do merges right to Parquet. I can do transformations right to Parquet. Doesn't really matter to Qlik Sense itself. Now, obviously, keep following me because other posts are going to show more of that analyze section. Today was really focused on look, here's all the things you didn't know Qlik could do inside of Qlik Sense because you were thinking about pie charts. Stop just thinking about Qlik as a pie chart visualization company. It's so much more what we can do with Qlik Sense and what we can do with Talent and what we can do with our pipeline designs. I hope that you all have a great, great day.